Good morning, everybody. Les Twentyman OAM is a youth worker who has spent a lifetime working with disadvantaged young people and street kids in some of Melbourne's toughest neighbourhoods. And there isn't much that Les hasn't seen. But he asked me if I could help him to arrange this visit to Canberra because he wanted to drive home to MPs the urgency and dangers of the ice epidemic. The point he makes is that ice is more dangerous than heroin because it makes users paranoid and violent and a danger to their families and the people who love them the most. He has been urging on MPs the need for outreach youth workers so that young people who drop out of school can have a plan B which doesn't involve resort to drugs and crime. So while he's been here, he's been able to meet with the opposition leader Bill Shorten, the government minister Kevin Andrews, the Greens health spokesman Richard Di Natale. I understand that today he's meeting with Labor health spokesman Cathy King and also the House of Representatives Standing Committee on Health. So from my point of view, it's really important to have Les here talking with us about this really important issue. So I thought I'd hand you over for Les to speak with you and answer questions.
Thank you. In my 30+ years as a youth worker and 10 as a school teacher, I've never seen a situation as difficult as we've got at the moment. You know, you've got at one end you've got the ice users, and then at the other end you've got the children that are trapped in ice families who don't go to school because the parents have got no idea what day it is. In one particular case in Melbourne, a young girl never went to school for the first 2 years for over 120 days. And that sets them up a bit later to have, first of all, a fractured education and then to have early access. So they become possibly the users of tomorrow. But the other thing is the extreme violence. In Melbourne, just before Christmas, we had a press conference with the Victorian Police Union and the Ambulance Union and ourselves because it's become very dangerous to work on the streets because of the ice. One situation, one of my youth workers, a guy had been on medication, his brother gets out of jail, gets him back on the ice, he gets paranoid about some sort of made-up affair, comes into the office, and it took 8 police officers and 3 cans of mace to bring him down. In my case, I had a situation where a woman threw a petrol bomb at me, and when my youth workers ran into her the next day, she said, "Oh, look, Liz has been dealing drugs to my daughter." So you've got all these sorts of situations. Of course, you can see with the Ben Cousins and Scott Miller, so it doesn't matter whether you're Olympian, doesn't matter whether you're a Brownlow medalist or captain of AFL premiership sides, once you're in the grips of this substance, you dance to that tune. So we're very concerned, particularly for rural Australia. It's wiping out some of the towns. I've just come back from working in America, and one of the things that's very, very concerning, and that is in America, when the effects of the real droughts and that hit, some of the farmers, desperate to get money, sort of turn to manufacturing ice. And this is what concerns me today. We talk about all that terrible unemployment around Australia, Tasmania, those sorts of things. So these kids are the potential gang and ice users of tomorrow. And in Western Sydney, where we're also going to be setting up, as we know, we almost have a daily shooting up there. The Brothers for Life have splintered. One of the splinter groups is a fundamentalist, and he's now recruiting Afghan refugees to be the shooters, saying that basically that the other gang part is too westernised. When they join the gangs up there, if they want to get out of that gang, it either costs them $10,000 to buy the way out, or they've got to take a bullet. Now, this is a concern. This is a new Australian, kids carrying weapons, and as I said, our safe havens, such as schools and hospitals, are no longer safe havens. And I'm asking the Parliament, this is urgent. I said to the Minister yesterday, there's too big a gap between kids that have been suspended from school. In Victoria last year, 12,000 young students were kicked out of school. That solves the problem within the school, but creates massive problems out in the community. So these are the sorts of things that I'm going to be speaking about today. This is a crisis. We can't back away from it. And overnight the news came from Perth that a raid on a bike, his den got 2.1 kilograms of methamphetamine. $340,000 in cash, machine guns, sort of automatic pistols and things like that. And that is permeating right around our nation. So I'm calling for an urgent national effort to try and re-engage. And one of those is having outreach youth workers at all schools. So when young kids are suspended, they're picked up by the youth workers and worked in either training or other educational facilities. We just can't kick them out, because you're doing that, you're just kicking them into the gangs and kicking them into the drug use.
So specifically on the things that you're calling for federal parliament to do, the youth outreach services is one, truancy another. What are some of the other things that you think federal parliament could do to address it?
Well, obviously education's a bit of a problem, because one shoe doesn't fit all. So we need far more diversity, particularly for at-risk kids. One of the programs that's very successful over in London is called the Shed, which we don't want to confuse here in Australia, because you've got the men's shed. But the Shed basically is where you get 5 or 6 professional actors and dancers. You get them together. The youth workers bring in up to 70 kids, and they work together over 3 weeks and write a play, put the music to it, and then perform. That was piloted in 2011 in Shepparton, and I was involved in it. And I remember one mother saying to me about a young son who's got Alzheimer's, never seen him smile before. So these are sorts of programs we need money putting in, because it's far cheaper to be running those programs than it is to be putting people in jails. I was in a jail in Melbourne just before Christmas, a brand new sort of remand centre. The place is absolutely chock-a-block already, and they asked me to address 60 of the inmates. I asked them how many got kicked out of school before year 10. All the hands went up. How many of you went straight into ice and other drugs? All the hands went up. And also I was asked to ask the inmates about the gang problems within. As you know, down in Melbourne, there was a situation where Carl Williams was killed in a Mexican, and this is the problem, that the gangs in jails are now permeating out into the community. So just putting them in jail is not the way of just losing the whole thing. So we've got to work at the cause of this, and that's disconnected families, dysfunctional families, and kids that feel totally isolated. And in some cases, areas of Australia, you're having up to 3 and 4 generations of no one ever been able to work, and that's created a culture of itself. And as I was saying to Kelvin earlier this morning, that we're finding we've got kids that are never ever going to be able to work, because there's been no structures, they've got poor education, and they're just treading water to waiting to drown. And the thing about the gangs, it gives them a sense of belonging. It's not much different to being in a Rotary club or a football team. You know what I mean? People need people, and if there's not positive functions and groups for them, then they'll slide into the drug culture. And it's another way of making money. We had the underbelly stuff, which is in my area. Benji, was a kid that I knew from years back. He killed 3 of his classmates. So, when it comes to drugs, there's no social justice, and as we're seeing, that basically there's no sense of right and wrong. It's all about the dollar.
Kelvin, can I just ask you a couple of questions?
Yeah, sure. Okay, thanks, Liz.
There's speculation about job cuts at Qantas and that they could sell their terminal at Melbourne Airport. What do you make of that?
Well, I don't know whether there will be job cuts or asset sales, but obviously they will have an adverse impact if they occur on workers there. The Victorian economy is doing it very tough with the job cuts that have been announced in manufacturing enterprises both in northern Melbourne and in Geelong. So I would be very concerned if there are going to be job cuts at Qantas. I think that will have an adverse impact on the Victorian economy.
Is it time for Labor to rethink its stance on the Qantas Sale Act to try and help the airline if possible?
Well, you've got to be aware that if you changing the Qantas Sale Act means selling Qantas to a foreign corporation. Let's not mince words, that's what it is. And if you sell Qantas to a foreign corporation, you essentially lose it and lose all control over it. It is gone, and we've seen the behaviour of foreign corporations. We talk about what's happened with Ford and with Holden and Toyota and the like. If you don't have any control over the ownership of the corporation, you have no capacity to maintain its operations in Australia.
An expert panel investigation into 457 visa rorts is expected to be announced. Do you think that will show that Labor's crackdown on 457 visas was unwarranted?
I don't know what the report will say, but in my view, the 457 visa program is exploited and rorted, that employers use it to bring in people who are prepared to work for lower wages and conditions than Australian workers in the hope of achieving permanent residence. We already have a situation in Australia where there are over 1 million people who are here on temporary entry permits that give them work rights, and that is against a background where you have over 700,000 people who are out of work and people at Ford and Holden and Toyota and so on who face losing their jobs. I think we would be better off if we restricted the 457 visa program and put the emphasis on educating and training young Australians and giving them the job opportunities.
Even though Immigration Department figures showed that about 1 to 2% was found to be rorting the system.
Well, I think the problem with the 457 visa program is that it assumes that you've got full employment and that there's no one else able to do this work. This is not true. We have over 700,000 Australians who are out of work. The prospect of more people losing their jobs, we just talked about Qantas, so it seems to me that the priority needs to be given to Australians who are out of work or at risk of losing their jobs.
Is it appropriate that a former Sri Lankan military officer is now a senior official at the Manus Island Detention Centre?
It doesn't sound appropriate to me. I'm not in possession of all the information concerning this, but I would have thought that may be a concern to people who are at the detention centre, and that it would be better if you didn't have someone with a military background there.
That man's been there for over a year, though.
Is a motion being moved last night from the notice paper that basically Parliament to apologise, calling on Bill Shorten to do the same to when Craig Thompson stood up in Parliament and accused a whole range of people of corruption. Tony wants Parliament to apologise on behalf of
Okay, look, I haven't seen the motion. I haven't had the opportunity to discuss it. We're not all accountable for the actions of all our parliamentary colleagues, let me say. They've all got to answer for their own actions. I wouldn't like to be held accountable for the actions of quite a few on the other side of the political fence. But as I say, I haven't seen the resolution. And
in Parliament, and he certainly seemed like he has quite a dark stain.
yeah. Now, of course, look, if someone does the wrong thing or says things which are untrue, of course that has the capacity to reflect on all of us. But there are some people who've come and gone in this Parliament and others who've done some pretty ordinary things, and whether everyone's got to apologise in every case, I don't know. I'd like to have a look at the resolution. Well, it would seem to me that he did, yes.
You said it would be inappropriate to have a Sri Lankan former army commander in charge of security at Manus Island, but that appointment was made under Labor, so how do you feel about that decision made by the former government? Well,
I wasn't aware of it. I mean, the reports in the last day or so are the first it's come to my notice, and I dare say the first it's come to the notice of a lot of people. And now I don't say I'm in possession of all the information about it and in a position to express a concluded view, but on the face of it, to have a former Sri Lankan military commander at the detention centre, that doesn't seem appropriate to me.
What's your take on news poll? Not a particularly good result for Tony Abbott, but Bill Shorten not doing great either.
Look, well, the news poll result is pretty strong for Labor. I've said before, I don't set a lot of store on polls, and particularly this early in the parliamentary cycle, but I did notice we had a state by-election in Queensland on the weekend where there was a 16% swing against the coalition government, so it does seem to me that there is concern amongst the voters at some of the things that the coalition is doing. On the one hand, we're seeing job losses, particularly in manufacturing, and unemployment rising to 6%. That is giving rise to job insecurity, and the government seems not particularly interested or engaged in supporting manufacturing and on the other hand, it's allowing all sorts of things to run up the political agenda which were not discussed prior to the election, like cuts to penalty rates, like cuts to the renewable energy target, like co-payments for Medicare visits, like raising the working age for pensioners. So I think that there is public concern about those things.
Just regarding Craig Thomson, again, if the Parliamentary Privileges Committee finds that he did mislead Parliament, what should be his punishment?
Well, I think that's speculative, frankly. That if the matter goes to the Privileges Committee, they can have a look at it and make recommendations in accordance with the rules of the Parliament.
They could also recommend that he get jail time, up to 6 months jail, apparently.
Yeah, well, look, as I say, I'm not a member of the Privileges Committee. It hasn't come before the Privileges Committee. I'm happy for it to run through an appropriate process.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you.